So we've done the videos talking about Shane Wright, we talked about Matty Savoie too. By the way, why I want 2022 is still going to continue strong with more prospects heading into this year's worth of players. But there is a name that kind of has the hockey world encapsulated with every letter of its being, and it's not the name of a prospect drafted later this season. In fact, it is the projected first overall pick of the 2023 NHL Entry Draft. So, about a year and a half from right now. Connor Bedard is a name that you have heard before. I don't need to go over this again because Connor Bedard has gone out there to the point where a lot of his records at the U18s and in the WHL last year were good enough to rival guys like Connor McDavid, do all this crazy stuff, and I mean, the guy's an exceptional status player. He's going to have himself a boatload of hype. But when it comes to Bedard and the season he is having this year, it's easy to go out there and say, okay, just how good is this guy really? Because now, just taking a look at the bare, cold, hard numbers, it might be a little bit more difficult to get that answer. So, before we go over everything here with Connor Bedard, let's just focus on what has happened so far. Capiche? He had himself his WHL debut last season after suiting up in Sweden for a short stint. He was a point-per-game player for the J20 HV71 team, which is a junior team in Sweden, so he went out there playing with 17, 18, 19-year-olds. He was 15, he scored himself a point per game, no big deal. He then suited up in the WHL for the Regina Pats, getting 28 points in 15 games. Now, that is almost at 2 points a game for a 15-year-old in the WHL. Phenomenal. Like, I cannot stress just how good this stat line right here is. It got so good to the point that the guy was rivaling Connor McDavid and actually besting McDavid's 15-year-old year for the Erie Otters in the OHL. Bedard's WHL season then came to an end when he departed for Texas to play for Canada at the U18s. The U18s is dominated mostly by 16 and 17-year-olds, but this season for Team Canada was a very interesting crop because you had Shane Wright heading in there, who was a young guy, he's 16 years old, and Connor Bedard, who was 15. These players were not the primary demographic that the U18s usually feature great performances from, but Connor Bedard went out there with 14 points in 7 games played. Sure, Shane Wright did not play all the games, and he had the same amount of points, but he also is a year older. Sure, Shane Wright had more goals, but Connor Bedard scored at the right time. He had himself some very nifty, very crafty goals, and he put himself on the map for all Canadian viewers of the U18s as a guy that you definitely should not be keeping your eyes off of the next few seasons. Now this year, this is where things have sort of taken a turn, because we noted Connor Bedard had a really good, almost 2-point-a-game campaign in 2020-2021 for the Pats. Well, this season, as a 16-year-old player, he's got the A on his sweater, he's gone out there with 21 points in 23 games, and he is a -9. Now, at face value, it's really easy to say, okay, what the hell? He played fewer games last year, he had more points last year, what happened to this guy? Are you kidding me? Is this our first overall player? Not my first overall, look at that decline. And that would be the easy, rational, immediate conclusion you could make just by looking at only the numbers. But let's go over just exactly how good Connor Bedard is and the status of the league as a whole, which determines how things like this actually come about. So, firstly, the WHL last season actually saw itself have a lot more production in terms of goals in general. If you go over to the top 10 point producers in the 2020-2021 WHL season, you could see that the point-per-game rates are up there at 179, 154, 148. In fact, if you go down to 17, 18, 19th overall in terms of the total points, you're still getting guys go out there with 121s and 132 point-per-games and 126s. And of course, Connor Bedard getting a 187 point-per-game rating makes this thing even more nuttier. This season, if you go over to the WHL point-per-game scores, the top guys are up there at 164, okay, Savoie, 152, okay, Connor McLennan, 148, okay, Michael Milne of the Winnipeg Ice, but then you go down and you see that the overall point production of all these players is significantly reduced compared to the year before. The average point-per-game rating of the top 20 point scorers in the WHL last season was 1.44 points per game. This season, if you calculate the top 20 point producers and average out their point per game metric, the average is 1.32, so the top guys in the WHL this season are producing less than they had been last year. Furthermore, the Connor Bedard Regina Pats were not really all too good last season in the standings, but this season they're even worse. Last year they were 5th place in their East Division, and sure, Connor Bedard left for half the season, so you could say that definitely had a part, but this season, hey, the team's down there at the last place spot in total. And that's not good. Connor Bedard, if you take a look at the point production of the Pats this season, he is over there as one of the top guys alongside of Ryker Evans and Stanislav Svozil. These guys aren't really producing all too many points compared to other powerhouse teams in the WHL. Last year, though, Connor Bedard was just an absolute man amongst boys, which is kind of funny. No, he's a boy amongst boys, a boy amongst other a little bit older boys, I guess you could say, but he still produced the numbers that he did. However, even though this may not be enough of an argument to say, okay, you're not really convincing me, Lego, he has really gone out there and reduced his numbers, why should I still believe in this guy? Well, here's another thing. Mitch Brown, who does work for EP Ringside, and he's the director of North American Scouting for Elite Prospects, he did himself a very interesting chart that he posted on his Twitter. Slow start for Connor Bedard? Think again. Before we read the rest of this tweet, let's go over the graph right here. This is a chart of CHL, USHL, and international prospects in a 5v5 setting, measuring out their expected goals per 60 rates against their expected assists per 60 rate. Primary assists, too. What this means is that the further right you are in the chart, the more expected goals per 60 you have, meaning the better goal scorer you are. The higher you go, the more assists per 60 you have, so the best position possible is being in the top right. You could see guys like Peyton Krebs and Alex Hovanov in the middle of the goal category, but at the top of the assist category by a mile. Guys like Cole Sillinger down there at the bottom for the assist category, but getting about 2 expected goals per 60, which is a really good metric too. And then earlier in the chart, you could see guys like Matty Beniers not really scoring out too many goals, but getting a decent amount of assists per 60 minutes, primary assists, by the way. Connor Bedard is all the way here on the right. He's above average in terms of primary assists, but he absolutely blows the competition away when it comes to expected goals per 60 minutes. Connor Bedard currently has the highest single-season individual tracked expected goals per 60 that Mitch has tracked in the last 3 seasons across any level with a minimum of 7 games tracked. And he's getting better every week. The second best metric, though, in goals per 60, expected goals per 60, it's Connor Bedard's U18 metric. So you see Connor Bedard and the Regina Pats logo on the right with 3 expected goals per 60 minutes and about a 1.1 expected assists per minute, primary assists. Connor Bedard's Canadian flag is right there too, as the second most productive expected goals per 60 tracked player above everybody else that we have seen, like Alexis Lafreniere, Anton Lundell, Cole Sillinger. There are some other prospects here, but they don't mention the names. It's fantastic just seeing the data as to how good Connor Bedard has been. There's actually a conversation I wanted to highlight here. It's an exchange between Brown and Scott Golding here in the replies. I think if you ask Bedard, he would say that he is off to a slow start because he's not finishing these chances, and his team is 11th place to start the season. After a few exchanges here, Brown says, "There's a lot more to the game than points. You're evaluating results, I'm evaluating the process. He's been the best player in nearly every game I have watched for the Regina Pats, creating chances at an unprecedented rate. I don't see that as a slow start. They'll start going in, guaranteed." So, in terms of the hockey point production side of things, I think it's fair to say Connor Bedard has gotten off to a slow start and that just the sheer quantity of pucks that go in the net is unsatisfactory to his expectations. But when it comes to the way that he is playing, it is very apparent that even though there haven't been too many points compared to what you probably would have expected, the impact on the game, the amount of offensive impact and generation, it's all still there at the level that you would have expected. It's just unfortunately not going in as much as you would want to either. So, Connor Bedard, at the end of the day, he is very good, and he has been so good that every other prospect in the past 3 seasons doesn't really hold too much of a candle to his expected goals per 60 rate, which, I mean, at the end of the day, you play hockey to score goals, so going out there and scoring goals in the same way Connor Bedard is projected towards being able to do is probably pretty good. Talk to me in the comments what do you think about Connor Bedard and the entire recap we have had over here. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.